Are we live? Awesome. Great. Well, I want to, should we get started? Great. Well, thank you for those of you who are hopping on. I want to welcome y'all to the last webinar in this series on escalation. Yeah, we're the fourth. So at this point, you've heard about narrative strategy and understanding how to tell a story over time with your actions, how to absorb after actions, and a little bit about reinvestment and how that relates to escalation in divestment movements. And today we're going to talk about why it's important and how to claim victory after your escalation. So Victoria, do you want to go over some logistics?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Silver. So folks can ask questions in the chat box that is in that's in the webinar link, or you can also ask questions at Twitter, #Escalation Core Webinar, and I will be monitoring those and sending those in so that we can answer them as the time goes on. If you missed the last couple of webinars, or if you can't make this one online, there are I put the link that's on the Student Divest website, studentsdivest.org/webinar, and that should take you to all of the past webinars and this webinar recordings. So that's it.
Great, thank you. I'd love for, although our name tags are beautiful and on the screen, for each of us to just introduce ourselves formally at this point. So if you can say who you are, your campaign, and why you're excited about taking action this spring, that'd be great. I can start. I'm Silver. I'm a UC Berkeley alumna that now works as staff within the divestment movement, and I'm a part of the Escalation Support Team. And I am excited about taking action this spring because it is another moment where, as a movement, we can collectively strengthen and amplify each other's actions by doing things together around the same timeline. And I think that taking direct action is just necessary for building and showing power and winning. And also, it's really, really, really powerful to do that as part of not just a campaign and not just on one campus, but as a part of a movement across a whole country. And I'm going to pass it to Sophia.
Hi, I'm Sophia. I'm a sophomore at Swarthmore College, and I campaign with Swarthmore Mountain Justice. I'm super excited to escalate this spring because I think that taking action is just super important, as Silver has said, in building power in our movement, but also as a really, really useful tool in gaining capacity, gaining membership in our groups, and can be used super strategically to gain power in each of our organizations.
Awesome. I'm Victoria Fernandez. I'm a graduate of UC Berkeley, 2015, and I work for the Divestment Student Network as an Escalation Core Coordinator now. Yeah, one reason that I'm really excited to escalate and help support campaigns to escalate and win in all the different ways is that really it's like the thing that gets the goods. Direct action gets the goods, and I have seen that a lot in my organizing, and I'm excited to yeah, just learn more about the different ways that we can win together.
Awesome. Great. So yeah, this whole webinar will be about claiming victory. And I would like to start us off by telling a story about another movement and what victory looked like there. And so one example of a couple different definitions of victory. Can be illustrated pretty well by looking at the Gandhi Salt March, which was in 1930 in India. And Gandhi and his followers created a campaign around the British imposed salt tax, which taxed salt, which is something that everyone used, and also banned folks from panning for or collecting their own natural salt deposits that occurred in the sea. Over the course of that campaign, millions of people took part in various ways, whether it was like illegally buying salt or taking direct actions. Many were arrested, and then thousands of them ended up marching to the sea and collecting salt illegally. Is where that kind of one of the moments where that culminated. So after that happened, in the end, like I said, millions of people took part to various degrees and sometimes severe repercussions. Obviously the British definitely reacted strongly to that during these actions. Arrests were made and fines and security sanctions, things like that. But after thousands of people marched all the way to the sea and started collecting salt, there were some negotiations, and that campaign officially ended with an agreement to suspend civil disobedience. Excuse me. In return for protesters being released from jail, having their cases dropped, security ordinances that were imposed to be lifted, and then authorities would refund the fines they collected for noncompliance and tax resistance during the campaign, and some of the property that was seized would be returned to folks. But on the other end, the salt tax remained at the end of this campaign. The British refused to investigate police action during the protests, and they deferred talks for independence for a later date, which actually ended up not being, those meetings that took place later weren't super effective in this timeline. So from the standpoint, if we look at that whole, tons of people took action, but at the end, that tax remained, and the actions of police were not investigated, and it didn't gain independence for India from British rule. It can look like, from that particular lens, like that campaign was a bit of a failure, and that was some politicians and even some of the activists who participated did feel that way at the time. However, there was a lot of press around this, with so many people taking action at the same time, and all the way back in England, people watching and taking note of how the British looked weak in response to this really, really strong mobilization by Gandhi and his followers. And for Indians in the country at the time, they looked at Gandhi going into negotiations with the British as equals, as a win. Just the idea that Gandhi would be negotiating on equal terms was more important and felt really impactful. Just the image of that, of him in British government buildings, looking like an equal with the British imperial government there, ended up seeming and feeling like a victory in and of itself, despite the fact that some of those institutional reforms didn't directly come out of this campaign. And so in the end, like in the eyes of the public there and just globally, it really made the British look weak in comparison to the strength that Gandhi was bringing. So actually it ended up being that the institutional reforms were significantly less important to the public at large than seeing people take action and Gandhi negotiate with the British. And so I tell that story because I think it highlights pretty well a couple different ways of looking at victory. You can look at victory in terms of those institutional reforms, like did it get the goods? Was the salt tax ended as a result of that campaign? And looking at definition in that kind of slightly specific, maybe narrow definition. And you can also look at it as a huge success because people built so much power and showed that power and ended up coming away from that campaign that much stronger in the eyes of the public and for themselves, with some exceptions. So I think there's this social view of victory and there's this institutional view of victory that story is really useful for describing. So you can also call that institutional change versus social change as lenses. And institutional change, again, it's a change in policy, legislation, and then social change is generally described as a shift in public opinion, raised awareness of the issue as a whole, and mobilizing and having lots of people take action to show the power. And so for me, that story and the way that it describes those kinds of change is particularly useful and leads into this really awesome quote that Mark and Paul Engler wrote for a publication, and they define claiming victory by social change standards by saying, if a drive allows activists to fight another day from a position of greater strength, with more numbers, superior resources, enhanced legitimacy, and an expanded tactical arsenal, organizers can make a convincing case that they have succeeded, regardless of whether the campaign has made significant progress in closed-door bargain negotiations. So I think that pretty much sums up that actually thinking about coming away from a campaign in a position of greater strength, regardless of what the institutional reforms may or may not be or where they're headed, that can be victory, and we can feel good about claiming victory based on that. So I kind of want to tell another story now that we've kind of laid out those views of victory and that really awesome quote, which I love. And it's actually an example of organizing that I've done and participated in. We kind of missed taking advantage of claiming victory from a social change perspective. So back in May 2014, I was part of the UC campaign, and I still am, for fossil fuel divestment. We went to a Regents meeting in Sacramento, and we mobilized like 60 people, and we're very present, and we're trying to get into the Regents meeting space to do a mic check. And we actually showed up so powerfully that they locked a good amount of us out. I was one of the people not allowed into the room, despite the fact that there was space in the room. There's a live feed. You can see that there are empty chairs. And so we ended up chanting really loudly right outside the door while folks inside organized and shut down the meeting for a few minutes and did a mic check. And we ended up coming away from that action with the Regents agreeing to form a task force to investigate divestment. And so this was a moment where we totally felt like we had made progress and we did claim victory. But we claimed it from the perspective of the Regents giving us what we wanted, and didn't really own the fact that it was a result of the way that we took action in a way that we could have. And how that was, like, what that resulted in was that we shifted a lot of our energy into the internal negotiations of the task force, and didn't continue to hold the regions publicly accountable on the outside throughout that summer, when the task force was occurring. And so when the task force, which ended up with a no recommendation for divestment, and which the regions in September of 2014 voted to approve, when that started to turn against us in that process, we were not coming from a mindset that our power and the power that we built in having that action was victory, and was an important part of victory, because we didn't think about it like that. We were not holding them accountable and continuing to take action. We did end up taking action at the Regents meeting where they voted no, but at that point it was pretty clear that we were going to get a no, and we were fairly, while we continued to fight on, and we continue to this day, it did feel like a loss, and it was fairly disheartening, and that mobilization that we did felt like a reaction to what the Regents were doing, rather than like a continuation of building power on our own terms. And so that's just an example from my personal organizing of probably a place where we could have continued to claim victory ourselves and come away much stronger and less disheartened when we got that no vote. And with that, I want to pass it off to Sophia to talk about Swarthmore Mountain Justice.
Thank you, Silver. Yeah, so I just wanted to share the following story of Swarthmore's escalation last spring as an example of when we can claim victory even when we don't achieve the institutional win that maybe we were hoping for. So last spring, Swarthmore Mountain Justice escalated beginning in March with a 32-day sit-in. And within our leadership, we were really hoping that, maybe, just maybe, we would achieve the institutional win of full divestment. But we knew going in that we wanted to be able to claim victory at the end, whether or not we got the policy win. So keeping this in mind, we set up our strategy timeline for the semester so that we would be able to claim victory at the end, no matter what happened. And for us, this meant, as we went into the sit-in, we weren't saying, this sit-in is going to last until Swarthmore divests from fossil fuels, because that could have set us up in a really uncomfortable way so that, if Swarthmore decided not to divest at their board meeting in May, we wouldn't have been able to end the sit-in in a way that felt victorious. We wouldn't have been able to claim victory. So instead of doing that, we decided to claim victory before the board had even made their decision. So we knew going in that we would claim victory no matter what happened at the board meeting in May. And in order to do that, we held a rally at the end of our sit-in on April 20th, and we used, instead of using the metric of a full divestment, we used certain metrics and things that had happened that we knew would help the students and the faculty and the alumni who had participated in the sit-in in various capacities feel really powerful about the work that they had done and what had come out of that experience. So some of the metrics that we used to claim victory were the fact that the entire Swarthmore community had come out in support of us. Over 200 people had participated in the sit-in. The fact that our sit-in put our board of managers in the international spotlight with international media coverage, a visit from Bill McKibben, and letters of support from the UN climate chief, Christiana Figueres. We also used the fact that 360 alumni had committed to withholding their donations until Swarthmore divested. 1,100 had signed our petition for divestment. And we also used the fact that after 30 days of our sit-in, the faculty passed a historic resolution which formally recommended that the board divest separately managed funds and reinvest in sustainable solutions, which was the first faculty resolution that had been passed since the Vietnam War. And we also pointed out that in November, the board had said that the discussion on divestment was over. But within 5 hours of the beginning of our sit-in, they went back on that statement and made a public commitment to putting divestment on the agenda for the board meeting in May. And actually, things didn't end there. Several weeks in, the board invited us to send in our proposal and our arguments near the end of April so that the board members could look at all sides of the issue before their board meeting in May when they would vote. So our major demand that the board seriously engage with our proposal was met. And sort of like Silver was mentioning with the story of Gandhi's Salt March, is we were able to show kind of the power of negotiation that we had with the board in that way. And yeah, so aside from framing the victory that we had within our campus context, we also wanted to kind of situate the victory within the movement. So we talked about how we had made huge strides in our own campaign, but also help to push our movement into the spotlight and help to inspire other students. The fact that our sit-in was the first of dozens of nonviolent direct actions that happened in support of divestment with students at Yale, University of Mary Washington, Bowdoin, UC Berkeley, Harvard, Wesleyan, and Tulane holding similar sit-ins at their schools. So we really framed this as marking the movement-wide escalation last spring as marking a turning point for the climate justice movement, because it was the first time that students across the country were taking coordinated direct action for divestment and keeping fossil fuel divestment in the media spotlight with coverage from NPR, The Guardian, and others. And that the buzz that we created and the movement that we launched generated major victories, helped push forward major victories at Syracuse University and the Guardian Media Group, which were some of the largest divestment wins to date. And yeah, we really wanted to help everyone who had, we wanted to make sure that everyone who had been involved felt really powerful about their commitment and their accomplishment. So we talked a lot about how, dozens of students had sat in for over 32 days and nights. People who had never participated in our campaign previously were activated by the action, and the space that we created helped to build community and also strategically put support on our board. So we use this messaging in press releases as we ended the sit-in, but also we had a rally on April 20th to end the sit-in on a really powerful note. And we were lucky enough that Karetti Tumalu of 350 New Zealand came and spoke at that, which was really amazing. And then several students who had participated in the sit-in delivered a lot of the messaging that I just talked about in speeches. But we also wanted to make sure that we weren't going to lose all of that momentum coming out of the sit-in. So we had an absorption plan even as we were ending the sit-in with that rally, so that we knew to make sure that we could recruit and train coming out of that 32-day sit-in. So in one of the speeches that a student gave, we invited people to come join us at a training on May 8th. And we also had an award ceremony a few weeks later in which we gave kind of these personalized awards to different people based on, things that they had contributed to the sit-in, whether that was singing a lot or having the best cookie sent from home or being kind of unconditionally supportive. And this really helped to keep up the morale and the energy in our base after they'd put a lot of work into their participation, and set us up really well going into the next year with kind of developing new leaders and still feeling powerful.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Sophia. Yeah, I think that was awesome. And laid out some really great examples of metrics of success. Yeah, it seems like Swarthmore, wanted the institutional win. Just to kind of like summarize, they wanted it, but also were completely prepared to claim victory regardless, based on who they activated, who came to legitimize their campaign, like Bill McKibben, etc. The different groups of people they activated in different ways, alumni, faculty, students, etc. It sounds very, very powerful. And then also making sure to support and uplift their base in all of the effort that they put in participating in it, with the celebration that Sophia was just describing. So I think those are really, in terms of saying, okay, we can't, fully rely on, and we need to be able to look at our movement context and our campaign context and know that we can take action and claim victory, even if it doesn't have an effect on our target's behavior. If that's the way that we're looking at it, and it is a really powerful way to look at it because it allows us to hold the power and not give it to decision makers totally. If that's the way that we're looking at it, those are really great ways of thinking about how to actually claim that victory and claim success really concretely. The 200 people participating, etc., the different letters of support, the historic faculty Senate resolution. All of those things are like facts about the power that was built, and that campaign, y'all really seem like you came away stronger than you were before and built a lot of power, and contributed that to the movement. And I love that piece about also bringing in movement victories and how it sparked a lot of other escalation that happened at different places around the country. I think that's really, really, really powerful. So yeah, in terms of thinking about framing it to the public, and claiming that victory to the public, talking about all of those things, who came, how many people, what kinds of people, were there people publicly endorsing your campaign as it was happening and escalating, what was the movement context of the power that was being built elsewhere that you were contributing to and amplifying. Those are really great ways to think about how to claim victory. And so, yeah, I think that if you're coming away stronger, then you're winning. And just like my story about the UC campaign was a pretty good example of like not owning that and finding that in yourself, and the work that you're doing, and the ways in which you actually like sacrifice your own power, and it's just not as strong of a campaign if you don't claim victory for yourself, based on your own metrics of success of the people that you've activated, and the ways in which you've shifted the public debate and discourse. And then that's just, great example of how to do it right. and we're doing that as a movement. Again, there's so much movement context this time around, I think, to pull from, all of y'all's escalation, because we're doing this together again. And so the last piece that I just want to highlight, like fairly quickly, is maybe a tension that sometimes comes up for people around the difference between institutional and social change, even if they both have merits. If you're like not highlighting anything that's happening on the inside, because maybe stuff is not fully moving there, even though with both my story and Sophia's, there was movement on the inside, and not usually, but there can be. But if you're not highlighting that, sometimes people have a tension around, like, is this like, are we spinning things? Is this, somehow lying or dishonest? And I think that our story is pretty clearly illustrate that, like, no, it's not lying and it's not dishonest to own and publicly declare the power that you're building as you're building it and claiming that as victory. And I think in the UCs with my story, there was a certain amount of burnout and a hard thing for us to grapple with as campaigners and for our base, that like we didn't win. And so if we're always focusing on that institutional stuff, it's just the movement suffers as a result of not being able to actually own what's actually legitimately happening and is victory in its own right, regardless of what is happening on the inside. And we actually had that in the UC campaign a tiny bit when we actually got a partial victory. There were some people who felt like because it was only 200 million divested from direct holdings in coal and tar sands companies, that wasn't it, because we hadn't totally won everything magically, perfectly all at once. And that can be like a legitimate feeling. And at the same time, to like not publicly claim it as victory in the way that we did would have been a huge mistake, because people, your base and supporters and people that know about what you're doing look at that and they're like, wow, you've made progress. And it can be really disheartening and like kind of lying to yourself that you didn't do something if you don't claim that as like progress and an impact on that you had on things. So that was like more of an institutional partial victory, but I think it still illustrates that point pretty well of like what the cost is when we don't, when we fall victim to a very real and natural thing that we're like committed to winning and wanting to win, but also like it's actually more powerful to shift the way that we think about winning a little bit to give us more power and momentum and continue to build strength, because what we're trying to do is really change the debate on fossil fuels and delegitimize them, not just getting some regents or trustees to sign a thing saying that they won't invest. It's about that and more than that too. Yeah, so I would love to, at this point, take questions if we have any. Victoria, how are we doing?
We don't have any questions yet. Maybe because of the 45-second lag.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
I guess I can ask you, are there any questions that you felt like you were grappling with when thinking about this concept, or you, Sophia, like when you first heard about this or anything like that?
I think the thing that felt the most new to me when I first heard about this, coming in last year as a freshman, was I think just the idea of thinking about how you're going to claim victory way before it even happens. That just seems, I don't know, that wasn't something that I would have ever thought of. Usually you think like, oh, okay, we'll do this and then we'll find out what happens. We'll find out how people react. But really, the importance of being so proactive and thinking from, day one as you're planning out your strategy timeline, how are we going to claim victory, is super valuable, super important. So you don't end up, like backing yourself into a corner where you can't do it as well. Yeah, for sure.
totally. I think, yeah, that's something that has been newer for me too, to like, wait a second, having your eye on victory ahead of time and how you're going to claim it. And I think when I hear all of those things that's Swarthmore like achieved last year, amazing and like mind-blowing, and like those things in my head, I'm just like, those things did not, happen magically, that you're like, we're going to put on a sit-in and then all of these other things are going to magically happen. Y'all, like, I mean, that was your campaign planning, it sounds like. And it was like really multifaceted and shows how powerful that campaign is on your campus, and how much of an effect it's had on the movement in general. Yeah. I think for me, in terms of claiming victory, I mean, I think I've kind of already said this already, but like, I think it's both like intuitive and also counterintuitive to claim victory this way. Like, it seems both necessary and true and right, and also there's such an instinct when you're like working towards divestment that like it is that demand that means you win. And with a movement as like powerful and also as far along as it is, it's just very important to think about what impact we've had regardless of wins. We have right now in the election, lots and lots of Bernie versus Hillary around fossil fuel investments, and like that's also some really great organizing that's happening that made that happen, but like has to do with the way that our movement has built power and brought that message forward, that like that is a stain on someone's reputation at this point, that they take contributions from people representing or associated strongly with fossil fuel companies. And Hillary Clinton got irate about the insinuation of that. And that's a victory, and that's how we're changing things. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts, reflections, or questions for yourself, Victoria, in hearing those stories? And
yeah, I think even like claiming victory can be about like imagining victory in general, like for yourself. And I think that's something that when I've been campaigning that I haven't always done. What does it look like and feel like to like win our institutional demand? And like yeah, I think when I was campaigning I was like, oh, it'll happen like when I'm graduated or like when I'm not there or something like that, and in like a number of years or something. But really, like, the fact that it could happen like next year, or like the semester that I was graduating, or like something like that, that was new. And I think like that visioning and like believing that we are actually like going to win is sort of like a step that we need to take when we're starting to do action planning and action sequencing, before like then we do the action sequencing and the action planning and then like figure out how we're going to claim victory. Yeah, which is really like awesome to think that there's a lot of stuff we can do around victory, which is amazing. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I love that that point you made about like maybe it'll happen after I graduate. And there is like, you're just like, oh, here's the thing, like the way that I used to think about victory was like, this is what's right in front of me and I'm going to do this thing, and then that'll just like somehow accumulate to like once enough of those things have happened, it'll just like happen like magic or something, and like who knows when, and like maybe it'll be after I graduate. And in the ways in which that's like so yeah, like I think the way that some people are in, and the way that I personally was working in this movement before, and at the same time like really kind of disempowering to not put yourself and the stuff that you're doing right in there as leading to victory. Like, oh, it'll just happen 5 years after I graduate. Well, like what? Like, I mean, I used to think things like that, or like, I don't even think I had a date in mind remotely. And that just feels like I was not owning the things that I was doing to grow things, because I had no eye towards where it was going, and I wasn't thinking. In some ways, that framing in my mind was like not thinking I was going to contribute to victory, even though I was doing that work already to a certain degree. And so like actually having it in your brain and like setting a time and a date where it's actually feasible, and we think we can do it, and then figuring out what that means and figuring out how to claim victory along the way is really, really powerful, and has really changed the way that I think about organizing, for sure.
The other thing that I thought or I liked what you said was like that it's not like we're lying about what's happening. I think it's more like about connecting the dots, like across our movement, like within our campaign on our campus, and like being really explicit about connecting those dots and how we're doing it. Because I think also there's like, or I remember feeling like wanting like the administrators to be like, we divested for like these moral reasons. And like, yes, if they say that, and sometimes they do say that, that's like amazing and that's great. But also the admin aren't also going to be like, as a result of this sit-in, like on the East Coast, like, 6 months later, like the UC system is going to divest from coal or something. And so it's really like up to us to connect those dots for the public, basically. And that's like a part of claiming victory, is like connecting those dots, or like having a narrative around what your win means, or what your sit-in means, or what your direct action means, not necessarily a sit-in. And that, even though that's not what they're saying, that doesn't mean that it's not true. So.
Yeah, there's a super strong eye towards like movement level things, I think. Yeah, that this lens of victory and way of organizing lends itself to, which feels so great, because it's like, it's not just what's happening on my campus. It's so much more than that, and it's not. Yeah, totally. I think that's super right. And I think with movements like marriage equality and stuff like that, like I think those are pretty good examples too of like movements that there was a lot of just slow build that then ended up resulting in the Supreme Court overturning and making marriage equality a thing so recently. But at the same time, that was like a product of so much slow building in so many different communities, and there was backlash during certain moments of that, and it was not super clear, I think, to the public that much. It certainly wasn't that clear to me as it was happening, because I wasn't a part of that movement really specifically. That was what was happening, that was moving towards victory, until it happened, and then it was like, it just is a thing, and like everyone has rainbow Facebook profile pictures, and like most people seem to be really happy about this, and like it seemed really crystal clear to me in that moment how powerful that movement was, but like was the sum of those parts, or like that journey, was not super clear to me before that happened, which isn't to say that maybe people weren't telling that story or anything like that. Don't mean to say that, but I think you're right, and that really resonates with me, that like we need to connect those dots for the public, like as it's happening, and also for ourselves, so that we can continue to feel that power, and know that we're having an impact really broadly on like a movement level that's going to like, I mean, this is like a really, what's the word I'm trying to use? Like it's kind of hugely momentous, like the task that we set ourselves, to just like fossil fuels have to go. Like they've got to stay in the ground. Like 80% of them, we're going to do that. Like that's kind of wildly amazing and overwhelming and ambitious. And also, we're totally like moving in that direction, and we need to continue to like share that with the public and own that ourselves, to know that that's really lofty, awesome goal is actually ever realer, as we continue to build power. Yeah. Well, awesome. If we don't have any questions, I would kind of love to close us out after this awesome discussion. Is that good, Victoria? Great. Cool. Yeah, so I just want to thank everyone for joining us today and for watching after the fact if you couldn't make it, and hope that this was useful for you. Just let you know that there's going to be an Escalation super page. I think it's going to be on the Go Fossil Free website somewhere. Is that correct, Victoria? Great. Yeah, so there will be a page announced very soon on the gofossilfree.org website that next week, that will have like a ton of resources, the links to all of these webinars so you can peruse them, a really great action planning template, and NVDA toolkit, and the action template with like an art cycle built in. It's like really awesome, useful resources for you and your campaigns and other campaigns that you know of or want to share with, to use that page. So it's all going to be collected and pretty and beautiful and really useful, and that'll drop next week. And yeah, I want to thank Victoria for doing awesome tech support, and Sophia for bringing all her awesome experience with Swarthmore Mountain Justice to this call and joining me. And I hope everyone has a great Tuesday, or whatever day it is when you're watching this. And we're going to build power, and we are greater than fossil fuels, and I can't wait to see all the awesome actions and things that are going to happen this spring, and hope that these webinars were useful for y'all in thinking about how to do that.